Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for what promises to be an insightful discussion on the global impact of EdTech in today's classroom. To those that couldn't make the time this morning and are planning on watching this as a recording, welcome to you too. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. My name's Brett Watson. I'm the General Manager of Growth at Campion Education. At Campion, we're committed to supporting schools to navigate their way through the rapidly changing digital education landscape, and today's session is part of that. We know across the globe, educators are facing increasing pressures from managing curriculum requirements, ensuring students are keeping up with their work, and all the administrative demands that come with this. A response to this has been a surge in EdTech products across the globe designed to support teachers improve their outcomes. Yet, with so many options available, simply selecting and successfully integrating these type of products can be an overwhelming task for schools and teachers. So on today's panel, we'll focus on practical and actionable strategies for weaving EdTech seamlessly into existing workflows in your school and ultimately driving meaningful improvements to student outcomes. And to do that, I have two people joining me today. I'd like to introduce two incredible leaders. First, Dave Craig, founder of Ripyl, a platform revolutionizing business education with ready-to-use real-world teaching resources. Welcome, Dave. Great to have you.
Hey, Brett.
And Victoria Mallinson, Chief Product and Operating Officer at Olex.AI, an award-winning AI platform transforming English writing, assessment, and feedback for schools. Nice to see you, Vicky.
Thank you very much for having me.
This session today is going to run as a Q&A panel, diving into sort of global trends and classroom applications for EdTech. So I'd love to be able to just ask you both a few questions and discuss the answers as we go. For those that are watching live, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section and we will leave time at the end to answer them. So both of you are based outside of Australia. Ripyl is founded in New Zealand. Olex.AI is founded in the UK. Do you think globally we've seen a shift in how schools are adopting to EdTech and AI, especially over the past few years? I might start with you, Dave, if I could.
Yeah, totally. I think just this webinar is a great example, right? You've got a company in the UK, you've got a company in New Zealand, and we're powering and providing tools to schools across the globe and Australia. And that's pretty amazing. And I think if you look back, 5-6 years ago, prior to COVID, schools were plugging away, doing what they could. And then the pandemic hit. Here in New Zealand, I think most schools were really trying to quickly adopt everything they could do to teach kids from home because we were in lockdown for quite a while. And I think that's really transformed into more of a mature approach now. So our schools here are seeing, lots of EdTech come online, but what they're looking for is more tools that actually do the job the right way. The question we hear at Ripyl when we, talk to teachers and leaders and SLT head of departments, there are a few questions. One is, does it fit with our curriculum? Is it actually going to improve the students' outcome and learning? And then the smart teachers that we love is the question. It's what I call the golden nugget. How much time is this going to save me? So then I can go spend, my weekends with my kids on the pitch, or take my daughter to dancing. So I think schools are starting to understand that they want technology and the plethora of tools that are out there. It's really hard to navigate through. So it's really around trying to provide a product that enhances the teacher's confidence. It doesn't replace that. I think, when we were in Sydney in early this year, Sal Khan was the keynote speaker at the conference. And, he asked the question around, is AI going to replace teachers? And there's about 8,000 or 9,000 people in the conference room. And, I was shocked at how many hands went up thinking that, artificial intelligence is going to replace an actual human teacher that does incredible work in a classroom. And so for us here at Ripyl, what we're trying to do is, use AI to enhance that teacher journey. So in the outcome, as kids have a better opportunity to learn what we reckon is a really important skill in the class, which is business. And I think, in general, we actually really have to think about AI as a new wrench in the toolbox. So a teacher, has had multiple kind of tools in that toolbox over the years. And, that one tool might take them a couple hours to, do something for their class. And I think AI needs to be seen as just that new shiny tool, makes potentially the problem a little bit quicker to solve, and it unlocks some more time so they can focus on what is really important, not paperwork, not stuff that drags the chain. It's actually giving them opportunities to have more time doing the things they love, which is educating our youth.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Vicky, is that sort of in the UK? Do you see the same thing, that tools that are fitting in and supporting teachers are probably the ones that are getting the biggest buy-in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a maturing of understanding of what EdTech can do, and the opportunities that it gives schools and teachers in the classroom. I think there certainly has been a really quite rapid shift in that understanding and that maturity over the last 5 years since COVID. COVID brought with it, in the UK, an awful lot of devices in the classroom, government-funded devices. So there were laptops everywhere. And I think a lot of post-COVID, post the need to run online lessons, a lot of those devices went back into cupboards, and all of I think a lot of the gains that were made in using those during the COVID times, then a lot of people then just went back to the practices from before. And there's in the last 3 years probably been a bit of a shift now to actually thinking about technology and getting those devices back out of the cupboards and actually looking for tools that are going to drive a genuine impact. And what we're seeing is, just with that growth in maturity, having maybe some schools that have tried products that they haven't implemented very well, or they haven't understood really what they could offer them. They're a little bit more skeptical now, and I think they're moving from trialing sort of tools and just playing with things to actually looking at running trials that are going to be validating their outcomes. So they're looking at, how is this going to change our schools? How is this going to change our teacher workload? How is it going to change our students' outcomes and impact on performance? And then actually measure that in a very very clear way, and defining the KPIs that they're going to measure that against. So I think it's just a real maturity in the approach to bringing new technology into the classroom, and doing that for a reason.
I think that's a really interesting point, that maturity, and going from testing tools, I guess through COVID, was almost out of necessity or a bit of a reaction, to being very deliberate about it. Have you seen, Vicky, sort of strategies that work particularly well in schools, with them helping set up those trials and set up how to adopt the tools to really ensure they get those outcomes?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that, in our experience, we've run hundreds of trials now with schools, and we, over that time, have really built a really good understanding of what makes for an effective trial. Certainly, to start with, understanding why, what your purpose is, what you're trying to measure. With any piece of technology, there will be a myriad of different ways of using it, different use cases and different applications, depending on the school and the students and the needs that you might have and the problems that you might be looking to solve, and actually very clearly defining what that problem is from the outset. And building your trial period around that, and keeping it quite narrow. I think we often see schools going a bit too broad and trying out every feature, rather than addressing it from solving a problem perspective. So keeping your trial very narrow. I think having really great IT support on the ground is really valuable, to be able to get past any of the challenges that you might face in the early days. And then from our perspective, what we see as being a really, really critical impact on running a successful, whether it's a trial or an implementation longer term, is having someone within the school on the ground who's really championing it, and is going to be that initial drive behind the momentum of the project, and the go-to person in school for those teachers who may be less comfortable with technology, and that they can really keep the energy and the momentum going.
An in-school champion, someone who can really support it. Dave, you spent a lot of time in the classroom sort of before you built Ripyl and during. Have you seen similar sort of things where having those trials and that really focused way to adopt it helps with success?
Yeah, big time. I think Vicky nailed it on the head, and it's critical to what we're trying to do through our platform. But identifying what a core problem is. So the school has an issue. Can our software help alleviate some of the pain points that problem is presenting to the teacher? But for us, we were really lucky, and we're still lucky because we do still validate in class. So we have a team that goes in, every term of every school year, and we talk to students, we talk to teachers, we run pilot programs for ourselves as well. And the importance for us to do that is to generate some real valuable feedback to our team, so then we can go in and create new modules for the teachers. And this idea of the small pilot it's so important, because and Vicky again nailed it on the head. You have to have that champion on the ground in the school, because they're the ones that are actually flying your flag. And if a teacher walks in and says, oh, I'm really struggling with this, traditionally that teacher's engaged with us multiple times and is better prepared to help that other teacher or teachers in the school really get the programs going. But I mean, it goes back to problem, solution, and then validating, right? And then if it works, great. If it doesn't, you move on to the next thing, and at least you can say to yourself, hey, we've given this a crack. It didn't really fit our agenda here at this school, so we're going to try and find something else that does.
And you could have the best tool in the world and it solve a problem really well, but if it doesn't fit into a workflow within a school, and if it makes things complicated for teachers and the staff at a school, then it's not going to be useful. So when you think about designing these tools, how do you think about ensuring that they can sort of fit into these different workflows within school? I might start with you, Dave.
I'll just probably go real simple here. I think our design rule at our company is, everything the teacher does, they should be able to open it, run it, and it should supplement their teaching. If we think about a school that starts at, say 8:45, you've got 40 kids walking in the class. If our tool slows that momentum down, then, we failed on day one. So through that validation stage, when we were building our stuff, we really talked to teachers, we talked to HOD, talked to senior leadership, tried to really gain valuable insight around what the teacher does. And so, when you think about, does a teacher actually stand in a classroom every day? Do they sit at a desk every day? No, they don't. The education around the career of a teacher, it's consistent. It's 7 days a week. They're on their phones at night. They're trying to, find information that makes their teaching better the next day. And so, I think it's really important that the tool, whether it's, for a teacher or for a student to use, it actually fits into their daily lives easily, and then doesn't create that drag that, you see a lot of tools do. And again, I go back to one of the biggest validation points we've seen with our stuff is teachers say, man, it saves us so much time. Thank you so much, because rather than spending 4 or 5 hours a weekend trying to build something, we use your stuff, and that allows us to go in and actually do, put more time and effort into the other side of the curriculum that we want to focus on.
Is it sort of similar from your viewpoint, Vicky? It's sort of, how you think about that design process to ensure it fits in within a school?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think for us, we have really kind of three key design principles, which I think align really closely with Dave's. Firstly, we listen to our teachers. We design, essentially co-design with them. I think almost every aspect of Olex has been developed in partnership with teachers and understanding what they're doing day in, day out. We're as a new technology, continuously innovating and developing, and therefore continuously keeping that feedback loop open with our schools and teachers to be building the new features and the new workflows and the new tools that they really need. We understand that on paper, you can design a product that in theory would work beautifully. And then the second, that hits the reality of a classroom where, your tech falls over, or your laptop is actually 7 years old because they haven't been replaced, or broadband cuts out, or, student loses their login card, and all of a sudden all of that perfect workflow goes out the window. So I think having a really good understanding about what that reality actually looks like, having fail-safe guards around that, little things like auto saving. So when their broadband does cut out, the whole set of work hasn't been lost, and it's still there when they can get back in. Secondly, keeping everything super, super simple. Things like single sign-on, really important, making that a really easy workflow for just getting on, as few clicks as possible to get to where you need to get to. So having, simple access as a really core design principle. And then lastly, for us, what's really important, and we've seen so much of this in the UK, is that there's no single standard workflow. Practically every school we speak to is just that little bit different. Some of them have one-to-one iPads across the entire trust, and that means they've got probably about 30,000 devices available to them. And then other schools have nothing. They have no access to anything. Some of them, kids are typing every essay. Others, they're handwriting, different quality levels of handwriting. So for us, designing multiple workflows that work for every teacher, regardless of how their workflow might be unique to them. We want to make sure that they the platform is equally accessible to all of those.
Can you share an example, Vicky, where you've seen that sort of embedding done really well, or potentially even surprisingly, something that you didn't expect the tool to be used for, or where it was to be used?
Well, I think, we have lots of examples, and as I said, there's lots of different workflows, and different schools using the platform in different ways. And actually, sometimes things we find schools finding new ways of using Olex that we haven't even really imagined them to do. One of our trusts, which is a group of about 10 schools in just outside of London, they are a very high-tech school, and they have Chromebooks, one-to-one Chromebooks across the school, which start from year one upwards, so kids kind of really young, and they have embedded Olex absolutely beautifully. And going in to watch those kids use the platform, some really young kids who actually you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be able to use devices as fluidly as they are. And what that means for those kids is that they have available to them all of the accessibility tools that can come with devices like that, whether that's speech to text, or text to speech, or sort of screen overlays, focus tools, and it allows every child within the classroom, obviously with Olex as an English writing platform, but also some of the other tech tools that they use. It means that every child can access it in the way that really, really works for them. So when we go and we watch a English lesson being taught, seeing some of the kids reading their work in, other kids sitting there with headphones and listening to the feedback being read aloud to them, other kids really, really effectively and efficiently snapping photos of their own work, and coming up to me, afterwards and showing me how excited they were about the imagery that we generate for their writing. I think it's just absolutely brilliant to see something and technology being used so well in a trust. Then another great example of actually embedding Olex really, really well. It's a trust that we've been working with for about 18 months. This is a secondary, and with them, they have just grown and grown and grown their use of Olex, where they again kind of started quite narrow, as I described in their initial implementation, to prove that it works, to prove the value and the effectiveness, and have then been expanding and deepening that use case since the initial implementation. So where they started with using Olex to improve the speed and pace that students could get impactful feedback on their writing. So year 10 children who were a year away from doing their exams in the UK, those children started getting more work being set for them, more essays, more practice tasks that they could be writing, because teachers weren't a bottleneck in the process of providing feedback anymore. And those schools, the schools using Olex in that way, were actually able to transform how they taught English, those English lessons, because rather than children doing, a piece of writing, an assignment, and in the next lesson a week later getting their feedback, they've already kind of moved on, and they're no longer interested in what they'd written. Students were doing a piece of writing in the first half of the class, and in the second half of the class they've already got meaningful, impactful feedback that they're editing and rewriting and considering that. And at the same time, the teacher has whole class insights that they can be teaching to and planning their next lesson directly from. So that sort of that speed of turnaround has a real impact on how those how teachers in that school are actually able to teach and think about how they teach English writing.
That's really interesting, because it sounds like in that case they started trying to solve a particular pain point or a need around sort of saving time, but as they started adopting the tool, they found that they could change their way of working to bring on the capabilities of the tool and actually open up a whole new opportunity for them, which is potentially something that isn't thought about as much with EdTech tools. Often it's like, oh, I have a problem I need to solve, when actually over time it can become a differentiated way in which you actually deliver the class or do the teaching. Is that something you've seen too, Dave, that, an example of how Ripyl has been embedded in the classroom, but then have you seen it sort of shift as people have gotten used to using the content over time?
Yeah, big time. Again, going back to the in-school validation that we were lucky enough to do for years, what we saw and heard from teachers was they wanted various modules to either kickstart their class, or they wanted something that ran just in, say, a block, or they wanted something that ran for a week or 2 weeks or a term, or 2 or 3 terms. And so we were able to be nimble enough to listen to that and then create some stuff for them on the platform. Some of the feedback, going into class in that validation stage, and then delivering it our way, and then building the modules, and then giving that back to the teacher and say, hey, why don't you give this a crack yourself and see if you can kind of, reform that magic in the classroom. Feedback from some of the teachers that were using the product in the early days were the teachers that were teaching the class after a Ripyl class. Those teachers were coming back to the Ripyl teacher and saying, what are you giving these kids? Because they're coming in, they're more, intuitive, they're asking better questions. It's like they're alive in the next class. And, for us, that's huge. All the way down the track where we've built a pretty big 10-part challenge where teachers can use that across a term, 2 terms, 3 terms. But what we've seen is, it's traditionally run in humanities or commerce, but they're bringing in, so it's a food truck challenge, or it's a, build your own business challenge, and they're cross collabing in school. So they're bringing in the marketing teacher to teach brand and product design. They're bringing in, the English teacher to help formulate their pitch at the end of the term or challenge. And that's beautiful, right? And we didn't see that happening at all, because we thought, oh, here's all the information you need and just go run it. But what's come out of that is that cross collab in school. So you're having not just the business class show up to the final pitch, you're actually having the entire school show up with their parents, because almost everyone's involved in it. And that's pure magic, right? That's education at its finest, in my opinion.
And yeah, that's really interesting that they've sort of taken it and run with it in a similar way that the schools with Olex did. When you see that, it's sort of immediately I sort of jump to, how do you make sure that all of the schools understand all these different ways that you can use this? Like, we're seeing these amazing things. How do you help schools sort of make sure they meet that initial need case, but then also enable them to sort of explore options? Or do you think it's something that schools have to be able to work through themselves to fit with themselves? Maybe I'll ask you first, Vicky.
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance because I think teachers have a huge amount to consider every day in the classroom. And when we're onboarding a new school and we're onboarding teachers, a school leader might choose to implement a new piece of technology because they can, they can see the vision of what it might do. But then the reality is that it's the teachers on the ground who actually need to be the ones using it and understanding it. So I think for us, it's building, it's layering, it's starting with what's that core use case, what's going to drive real day one impact on, whether it's workload reduction, making their teachers' lives easier, improving children's outcomes, and starting with that initial pain point that we're really trying to solve for them, and then slowly layering on additional tools and functions for them once they build comfort and confidence in the initial use case. And there's loads of ways of approaching that, whether through webinars. I think for us, coming back again to that concept of the champion, someone who is that leader in being really engaged and interested in understanding what the new opportunities are, and they might be able to then either pilot additional features or additional use cases that can then be rolled further out across the school.
Yeah, the thought about the champion came into my head as you were speaking as well. Mm-hmm. Is that sort of what you see too, Dave, that you don't want to go too fast, that you want to sort of be able to work with the school and the champion help push that forward?
Yes. I also think too that with the plethora of tools that are available to teachers, it's almost a bit overwhelming. So, a teacher might be looking for some type of tool that does something, and there's 400 options. And it's a bit like our platform, to be honest. We have so much on the platform. And so, when we onboard schools, it's really making sure that those teachers, the champions, they understand that, here's everything. It's like the encyclopedia, and you probably only need the first chapter of the first book to get started, and making sure that they understand what that looks like. And then, they layer it on, like Vicky said. And I also think too, like going back to the champion in school, they actually become a champion for your business because they're the middle person between, the fabulous teachers that are doing the job and us. And so, if you can connect those two together, all of a sudden they're pushing your product in school. They're the person that everyone goes to if there's issues, but they're also providing you information back saying, hey, the teachers would really like to see this. Do you think you could put that into the platform? Do you think you could build a module around something like that? So, yeah, big time.
The role of this champion, coming through from both of you, is that it's important for you to get that feedback and how to connect with the school, but important for the school as well. Do you think that that's something that the school needs to be choosing very early on? You're going to be the champion of this, go out and find the tool, or is it something that you think happens more naturally as a self-selection as something comes into the school for the first time? Maybe Vicky, I think you've taken yourself off. You're keen to.
Keen. This is the Olex champion or any product champion is something we're actually really passionate about. It makes an enormous difference, and getting it right from the start, I think, is really crucial. So for us, it would be identifying it pretty early on in the process so that they can be, obviously kind of first adopters if there's any pilot processes before a broader adoption, having the Olex champion or the product champion leading on those and receiving, if you're going to be splitting your training up, making sure that the Olex champion is trained kind of first and foremost and can then be the we train the trainers essentially, and they can then disseminate the knowledge. So that's not to say that you don't then build through on the ground implementation additional Olex champions who actually become part of that. That will kind of naturally come out, but for us, having someone from day one is really important.
How do you see it, Dave? Is that something similar that you've done previously?
Yeah, I also think too, like, senior leadership at a school, it's hard. You have to kind of coach your staff, your team independently. It's this one size fits all doesn't work, right? So if you're trying to force something down a teacher's neck around you have to be the Ripyl champion. That's not going to work for us. So it's really, that self-selection, that if I'm a business teacher, I want the best tools that are available to teach this subject in my school. Having that passion to go out and find the right stuff, and then potentially that person does become the champion. It's hard, right? Like, I always go back. I talk to lots of people. I talk to lots of my age people, and you're in school 13, 14 years throughout your life, and you can probably count the really great teachers on one hand. And that's been our kind of mantra at Ripyl, is we want to increase that. We want to be, we want to make business as exciting as science was. Science class, everyone seemed to like the science teacher because you could blow stuff up, and you had fire and you had lots of cool stuff. And it's like, well, if you have the right teacher, one of my favorite teachers was a history teacher. I'm in no way a history fan, but that teacher, had that special spark, that magic to connect with me. And, that's what we're looking for. And yeah, it's so important. It's so important. And again, like Vicky said, you get the one, and then the product, the platform works so well that the second person that was using it in the same school becomes the next champion. And then it's just this domino effect of, why wouldn't we want to use this tool? Because it makes life so much easier.
That's sort of a lovely image of providing a tool to support a teacher to sort of help them build the spark. It's a really nice idea. You were talking before, Vicky, about some of the equity parts that the school was using Olex for. Equity and inclusion, or diversity, is sort of some of the things that EdTech has sort of pushed a lot of being able to support. Do you think that that's going to be a really important part in the design of EdTech products, being able to support that? Or do you think those are great, but you still fundamentally have to meet a core need first?
I think it's not just that the requirement on the EdTech tools. I think with particularly the advent of AI, I think this is just an amazing opportunity to offer that equity and that accessibility in a way that has never really been possible before. The level of personalization that we can now achieve through technology, really quite efficiently and easily, I think gives us almost this responsibility to make that happen, and to turn that into technology that schools can actually easily implement to really kind of harness the benefits of that. I think personalization through AI is just going to be incredible, whether that's through kind of tutor-bots or anything else, or what Olex is doing. For us, it means personalizing and kind of adapting the feedback that students receive in their writing. We have built-in language translations for our English as an additional language students. We have ability to adjust reading ages of feedback and how it's structured. So I think there's very much a responsibility on us to make sure that we harness all of that opportunity to make education more accessible and equitable.
Dave, your platform is a little bit different from Olex in that you do have a lot of the human generated content that's required to really sort of help support the teaching and the excitement in the class. How do you think about sort of the equity and inclusion and the different ways of teaching when there is a bit more of that manual element than sort of where Vicky is coming from?
Yeah, we started the platform because I had a real passion to drive into the communities here where I'm living in New Zealand that didn't have all the nice tools, that didn't have the cash, in the bank to go out and buy Chromebooks and this and that. And so for us, it was really identifying, what schools we wanted to go to, what communities we wanted to go to, and then creating, a platform, creating modules to do that. I think, for us, we don't have a tool that is used in class by students yet. We're more of, as Vicky said, train the trainer platform. But the learning that we do is, we like to refer to as it's contextual learning. So challenges connect with the local community. So rather than doing a case study around business growth or market validation using Nike, say, as an example, or Microsoft, we actually drive into local communities and find businesses that the students, the families connect with. As an example, there's a gelato shop down in Christchurch, and it rose out of the earthquake. After the earthquake happened, a young guy started a gelato shop, and so we built multiple modules around that gelato shop, and then pushed it back into the Christchurch community. And it's great. The feedback we see is our kids go and get gelato on the weekend, and then on Monday they're learning about the business model of the gelato shop. Right? That's amazing. And again, it's hard because it's not as fast to replicate, because if we were to do that all around the globe, it would take heaps of time. But we're prepared to do that. And so I love what Vicky said. It's on us, right? Education, it's the most powerful tool that the human has. And if we can't figure out a way to actually be equitable across every single school in every corner of the globe using a tool, then we failed. And we failed our kids. I think about, I've got 4 girls, and if we can't do something that makes their lives a little bit easier, that then they can build on and make their kids' lives a little bit easier, then we haven't done our job. So we're all about that equitable outcome for every student, whether it's a student that has a learning difficulty or a student that's top of the class. You can always learn something, and always learn something differently.
I love that both of you have thought about this so intrinsically to how the products have been built, but in quite different ways. But it's still fundamentally, it's how do you open this up to ensure that people can use it in a much more equitable way, and you're engaging with everyone in an equal way. So it's really nice, and wasn't expecting that answer. So it's really interesting to hear. If I could maybe now sort of switch to looking forward a little bit. As we talked about at the start, we had the period through COVID where sort of technology in schools took a huge spike, and then maybe schools have walked away from that a little bit to try and become a bit more deliberate about what they want to use tools for. Then since 2022, we've had ChatGPT, and things feel like they've gotten crazy again, and there's lots and lots of acceleration and advancement. In your views, if you look forward 3 to 5 years, what do you think will be shaping classroom practices in terms of EdTech and AI? Do you think this is going to be a continual acceleration? Do you think we're going through this period a bit like COVID, where people are trying lots of things, then we're going to settle down and resettle? No one can predict the future, but Dave, have a go.
It's a good, tough question. I'm the ever optimist. I always think that any tool we're using today is going to be obsolete probably in the next 10 to 15 years anyways, because there's going to be something better that's coming on board. But I think the next 5 years for us in education, it's really going back to what Vicky said, that personalized learning. It's giving tools to students so they can learn in the way that they consume information, rather than being told to sit down and listen to the way I'm going to teach you. But I also think too, like if you look at a teacher, if I look at a teacher as a business model, so often staff work in the business, they don't have the ability to work on the business, so they can't take the time to kind of elevate themselves and say, I wonder what would happen if I did this. And I think AI will give teachers that opportunity now, because that new shiny wrench will make that job a lot faster, which hopefully will give the teacher more time to come back to why they got into education, right? It's being creative, it's educating our youth, it's making those kids feel inspired, it's connecting with them, it's using all the life skills that a robot will never have, right? Empathy. But on the flip side, we're looking at it from our standpoint, saying how else can we enhance that business education for a student? And so we're knee deep in Ripyl GPT that we're building. So, you know, it's giving a student the ability to work on the stuff that they worked on in class at home or on a device. It's giving them information back that's served at their level. So it's not just a generic response like you get from normal chat GPT or a normal large language module. But yeah, it's exciting. You know, I think with technology too, it gives students the ability now to connect, like we've seen classes connect from Perth, Australia into New York. You know, they're working on modules within the platform, and the teachers have connected inside our platform, and now all of a sudden the students are connecting to each other in different places of the globe. And you know, that's amazing, because you know, when I was a kid, mom and dad would take me out of class and take me on a trip, because traveling was the best education in the world. And you know, so we're trying to combine both of that within our platform, solely focused around business. But yeah, I think the ability and the opportunity for us in this space is to really turn classrooms from, you know, consumers of tech into creators of solution. That's the way I like to see it, because that's, you know, if we can start using the tool to give more time for those people to lift up and actually work on what being a great teacher is, without all the, you know, useless paperwork, especially here in New Zealand, those teachers then, you know, thrive. And if you've got a thriving teacher, the classroom just seems to follow suit.
Yeah, personalization, connection, and time. Are they sort of how you think about the potential for future, Vicky?
Yeah, for sure. I think what AI has brought teachers in workload reduction is all about that's the sort of the content creation side of things, and administration, and the ability to create, you know, a lesson plan like that, or adapt a resource in about, you know, 3 seconds, will massively free up teachers' time to you know, not sit back and kick their feet up and drink coffee, but actually to do that part of teaching that was the reason why they went into teaching in the first place, which is a bit of a cliche phrase, but I think it's very, very true. And the, you know, in the UK, the teacher, you know, retention crisis, teachers are leaving in thousands and thousands every year because of the workload, because of the you know, the sort of monotonous aspect of the administrative stuff, and the sort of burden of that, and how that's actually taking them away from spending time teaching the children, you know, planning better lessons, delivering interventions with those students who really, really need it. And I think that for me is, you know, I just, it blows my mind that people think that AI is going to replace teachers, because there's so much need for teachers to do all of those amazing things, which is what they understood teaching to actually be. And AI can do all that other stuff that is really all the sort of less impact, less value add areas, as opposed to what teachers can do themselves. For me, obviously, the world we're operating in is around assessment, and I think assessment is going to go through an enormous transformation over the next 5 years. The opportunities that AI assessment present are just going to have so much impact. I think we are already getting feedback from schools that where AI is assessing students' work, their written work, the teacher now takes on more of the role of a coach for the students. So it's less about the teacher being the judge of the student and therefore having that negative impact on the relationship. It's actually that, you know, AI is providing completely objective assessment, and the teacher is there to help the student understand that and address that and improve from it. So that has a possibility of really changing the relationship and how student teacher relationship, and how students view their teachers. I think secondly, the assessment, I think we're going to move much more towards a sort of always on formative assessment environment, less on that summative assessment, because assessment of writing in the old world was really hard and took a really long time and took a lot of man hours to do. And so therefore we could only do it very irregularly because of all those bottlenecks. Whereas if it's something that is, you know, zero workload and zero manpower, we can be assessing every piece of writing we can be assessing, every week rather than 3 times a year or once a year. And that means that we're getting much more regular, frequent checks, and we're able to spot where, development opportunities are, where strengths are, where gaps are, and be addressing those much earlier on in children's career. And then the last thing I think, which is really interesting, and this aligns very closely with the work that's happening in the UK right now around the Department for Education here has released a new writing framework, which places much more emphasis on helping children develop fluency in writing, and build the sort of the layers of building blocks that they need to develop that fluency, starting from sort of transcription skills, and then building through sentence structure into paragraph structure. And I think what is really interesting is how you can potentially apply a level of assessment of writing fluency in other subject areas. So if a child is writing a history essay, they can still have their writing assessed against their fluency skills, because you can just click an AI button to do it. And that history teacher can then get insight into whether actually the child is underperforming maybe on their history answers, because the cognitive load for them of forming sentences and forming paragraphs and structuring that is stopping them from being able to really effectively answer that question on history. And I think that gives, just incredible potential to improve outcomes for children and improve the way that they learn, in a way that just was absolutely impossible before AI made assessments much more easy and much faster.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea and a really exciting one, with the teachers sort of being able to be more of that coach because they're not the judge, but then being able to do that assessment across different subjects in different ways, and really trying to understand what are the areas that the child excels at, and what are the areas that they really could use some support with, that are impacting more areas than perhaps we could see in the past. Apart from AI not replacing teachers, what is one thing that you think we're not going to see that perhaps people think we are going to see in the next 5 years, Vicky?
Oh, tricky question. What are we not going to see? I think the pace of change is not going to be maybe as fast as people would expect it to be. I think schools go, their experience of EdTech over the last 5 to 10 years means that they go a little bit more slowly, they go more carefully, they have a lot more rigor around how they assess and validate tools. So I think it's going to be, while we have seen a very, very rapid embracing of AI in schools, and that's happened literally in 2 years, it's just, the nature of the conversations we're having with schools has just completely 180'd from, very, very nervous about AI to 2 years later, they've got AI policies in place. They are trialing a range of different tools and doing it with purpose. But I think from here on in, I think I don't think that we're not going to have robots filling all of our classrooms in 5 years' time. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than that. So that's my perspective, is that probably the next few years it'll be slow and steady.
I think it's probably reassuring for a lot of us. Dave, what do you think? One thing that we won't see in the next 5 years that perhaps people think we will?
I mean, everything Vicky said is bang on. I think in life, the pendulum always swings to either side, and then eventually it comes back to the middle, and it might be off center just a tad. But we're not going to see robots teaching kids empathy and problem solving and creativity skills. It's just not going to work, right? I don't think robots, humans are wired for connection, and at the base of education, going to school every day as a young kid, I even though sometimes I didn't like going to school, I still enjoyed the connection with my fellow students, my teachers. I still really enjoyed learning. So this idea that in 10 years time we're going to be sitting in a screen, having some Elon Musk robot teach our kids something about something is just that's absurd, and I hope I'm right.
Fantastic. We haven't had any questions come through on the Q&A. So what I might do then is just finish with one last question for you both, starting with you, Dave. And if you could give one piece of advice to school leaders considering EdTech adoption, what would it be?
Just one? I would say go talk to your customer who is your teacher. Listen to them, understand their needs, and then actually identify some tools that are intuitive and evidence-based that will help them solve the problem that they're having at the moment.
Vicky?
Yeah, I think my answer is pretty similar to that. I think it's consider your why. Why are you doing it? What problem are you looking to solve? And then find the tool that is gonna address that.
Oh, look at that. We finish on perfectly aligned, unplanned answers. Excellent. Thank you. So thank you both very much for joining us this morning. Dave coming in from what I'm hoping sunny New Zealand, Vicky from very late at night in London. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
So for those that are tuned in or watching the recording, if today's discussion has sparked ideas for you or your school and you want to continue the conversation about either Ripyl or Olex, Campion is working very closely with them to bring them to the Australian market. So you can reach out to your Campion account manager, or you can reach out at edtech@campion.com.au to find out more. Thank you everyone for listening in or listening to the recording, and we'll be sending out the recording to your inbox, including a PD certificate very shortly. Thank you very much, everyone.